is an HTML document, or this is an XHTML document. So, in HTML5, to avoid needless complexity, the doc type is doc type HTML. Even I can remember that one. Now here's the nice thing. This is, theoretically a nice thing. Oh, isn't it lovely that we want authors to have a nice, memorable doc type. Let's use doc type HTML. Good. On the face of it, though, when I first saw this doc type, I thought, no, hang on, wait a minute. Shouldn't the number 5 be in there somewhere, maybe? I thought, this is the height of arrogance. Are they saying this is HTML forever? Like, there's never going to be another version of HTML. We're going to get it right first time. No, that's not what they're saying. You have to understand why doc types exist. So when you put a doc type on top of a document, you say, this document is in HTML 3.2, or this document is in HTML 4.01. That's not there for the benefit of the browsers. Browsers don't really look at the doc type that much. It's there for the validators. As I said, the reason why I use the XHTML1 doc type is because it makes the validator a more useful tool. The browsers don't actually care which version of the language you're using. I mean, let's say you're using HTML 3.2, right? You've said in your doc type, I'm using HTML 3.2. And then somewhere in the document, you use an element from HTML 4.01. Does the browser refuse to render that element because it doesn't agree with the doc type? No, of course not. It renders the element because of Postel's law, right? It's got to be liberal in what it accepts. So browsers don't care that much. It's basically about the validators. And because browsers don't care that much, and because one of the core principles of HTML5 is not only backwards compatibility, but future compatibility, any future versions of HTML, and there will be an HTML6 and an HTML7 and HTML8, they must also support everything that's in HTML5 and everything that's come before as well. So the whole idea of having a version number in a doc type just doesn't make that much sense in the long term. I mean, maybe people who write validators would disagree, but for the practical purposes of writing on the web, it really doesn't matter. Now, I say it doesn't matter. There is one time when browsers pay attention to the doc type, but it's kind of a hack. And that was when CSS and web standards are really taking off. There's the CSS box model, which is the official way of doing things. And Microsoft had gone ahead and implemented a different box model. Actually, in some ways, a more intuitive box model. So Microsoft wanted to do the web standards way, but they couldn't break compatibility with everything they'd done before, right, and break these existing websites. So they needed some kind of trigger that would allow them to know, okay, I should use this box model rather than that box model. And so they came up with the box model, the doc type switching hack, which is very clever, which simply says, if the author is smart enough to put a good, well-formed doc type like HTML 4.01 or XHTML 1.0 at the top of their document, then I'm going to use the standards-based box model. Okay, pretty straightforward. So, $6 million question. If you start using doc type HTML at the top of your documents, what happens? Is it going to switch into quirks mode, or is it going to use standards mode? Well, it turns out this is the minimum number of bytes necessary to trigger standards mode in Internet Explorer. So what HTML5 has done is balanced the theoretical idea, which is, oh, we really like it if authors could have a nice, short, memorable doc type, with the practical consideration of it has to work. And it has to be backwards compatible. We're not talking about it has to work in future browsers, at some future date with our jetpacks and our flying cars. No. It has to work now. It has to work today. And this does. So this kind of pragmatism you'll see again and again throughout HTML5. Some other examples of omitting needless complexity. HTML 4.01, I want to specify the character encoding of my document. Now obviously, the best way to specify character encoding in a document is from the server side, right? You send the header and says, this document is in UTF-8. But you can also specify the character encoding in the document itself as a backup. And in HTML4, you use a meta element. Anybody memorize that one? No? Okay, me neither. It goes like this. Not quite as complex as the doc type, but still pretty verbose. For XHTML 1.0, it's even slightly more complex because as well as having the meta element, you also have to have the XML declaration itself specify the character encoding. Okay, so again, this is stuff that you look up, or you have a snippet, you have your text editor do it for you because nobody memorizes this stuff, right? What about HTML5? How do I specify the character encoding in HTML5? It's still done with the meta element, and this is how you do it. You say meta charset equals UTF-8. Okay, nice and simple. Omit needless complexity. once again, this is the minimum number of characters necessary to do this. It turns out browsers have always supported this because of Postel's law, because of the robustness principle having to be liberal in what they accept. Turns out whenever you put a meta tag in there saying character set blah 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 blah, browsers just look at them and, oh, which bit is the character set? Okay, UTF-8, okay, that's the bit I need. And this just gets codified into HTML5 as saying we can just leave out the other stuff because actually it doesn't matter to browsers. And it's what matters to browsers that's really important, right, to what happens on the web. So that's nice. And there's a couple of other areas where they've omitted needless complexity. When you link to a style sheet, let's say using the link element, you say rel equals style sheet, and then you say type equals text/CSS. It kind of saying the same thing twice, right? The Department of Redundancy department. So you don't have to specify type. If you've already said it's a style sheet, the browser knows it's going to be in CSS. And again, your server should actually be sending the right MIME type header anyway. So you don't have to specify the type. You can, right? It's not illegal to specify type equals text/CSS, but you don't have to. And this works in browsers today. This isn't some future thing. This is the way browsers work right now. Likewise, if you're pointing to a script, a JavaScript file, or you're writing some JavaScript and you tell the browser, it's typed text/JavaScript, I think the browser's going, yeah, I kind of knew that already. Because what else is it going to be, frankly? I mean, maybe you're using some other scripting language to do client-side scripting, but unlikely. So again, you can, if you want, specify the type attribute when you link off to these things, but you don't have to. Why don't you have to? To omit needless complexity. Here's another design principle that you've already seen in action. Support existing content. It's not enough to come up with a new specification that's just wonderful and unicorns and butterflies. It's going to be great if it breaks backwards compatibility with what's already out there on the web. Right? There's this balancing act that HTML5 has to walk. So, some examples of supporting existing content. This is a controversial one. The syntax of HTML5, well, it's kind of whatever you want it to be. This is 4 different ways of writing the same thing. We have an image element, image node, and a paragraph element with an attribute on it. And you can see the syntax is written in slightly different ways. Sometimes the elements are uppercase, sometimes they're lowercase, sometimes the attributes are quoted, sometimes the standalone element has a closing slash, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the P element has a closing tag, sometimes it doesn't. All of these are equally valid in HTML5. The reason why all of these are equally valid in HTML5 is because all of these are exactly the same to a web browser. A web browser that gets fed a document with these 4 things will convert them into exactly the same DOM tree. It doesn't care. There's no speed benefit to using one type over another. The only reason why you might prefer one syntax is because of coding style, because you feel that, I think it should be